Hi, my name's Simon Holmes. I'm one of the lecturers in radiography at QMU Mammography University, and in this short presentation I'm going to talk a little bit about supporting the failing student. Now, dealing with a failing student is not always the nicest thing to do, and there are some challenges that we can all acknowledge. The first one is that you might already have a relationship with the learner. You might be their friend, you might be their line manager, and as a result you might feel responsible for them failing, but it's really important that you don't feel responsible. You might have to manage quite considerable amounts of distress if the learner is failing, and this can be very difficult. There may be personal circumstances that you do know about, personal circumstances that you don't know about that you might need to deal with and maybe talk to the student about, and this can be quite difficult at times. And finally, supporting a failing student can often be very, very time consuming. And it's important to recognise there is support for you at SMEC and Queen Margaret University in order to help you with this process, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. Now, there are a number of ways that we can work with these challenges, and the first thing to recognise that the responsibility of failure lies with the learner. It is not your responsibility as the mentor to learn for the learner, but it is their responsibility. So it's important to recognise that. Secondly, it is okay to fail a student. If you feel that they're not meeting the competency levels, then as a mentor, it's your responsibility to make sure that you fail the student. And remember that the student does have options to have a second attempt at failed elements, and you can talk to either people at SMEC or at QMU about that. We also have systems in place to help with difficult circumstances, such as the extenuating circumstances process, where students can submit coursework or take on clinical skills training at later dates. And also we have the process of deferral, where students can get a bit of breathing space for a year before they carry on with their studies. So please, again, talk to QMU and SMEC about those options. Now, there are a number of signs that you can look out for regarding a student who might be failing, and these can include a number of elements which are noted as being different from their usual performance. So they might suddenly develop poor communication and interpersonal skills. They might suddenly start going very quiet. They might have a lack of interest and participation in the clinical elements. They might have a lack of personal insight when you're having discussions with them. They might note a lack of awareness and professional boundaries, so they might be demonstrating unprofessional behaviour. So really what you're trying to find is a lack of progress within the students learning throughout the module. And what you can do is raise a cause for concern. Now, a cause for concern is a form that we would fill in with you with SMEC and QMU. So please, if you do have a cause for concern that a student might be failing and they might be showing any of these signs and they might be having a lack of progress, please call us, because we can't act on anything unless we are aware of the issue, and you are the first line from the point of view of picking up these issues. So please do contact us at QMU or SMEC, and please don't be afraid to highlight the fact. It's worse to leave it than it is to address it, so please don't be afraid to highlight it. And again, any problems, contact us and we can help you through these processes. Now, there may be a number of symptoms associated with a student's lack of progress or issues for failing, and symptoms can be very difficult to assess, primarily because there may be emotional issues involved and there may be personal issues involved which the student simply doesn't want to talk about. Now, these kind of issues can be very difficult to talk about in any circumstance, but if you then add on the issue of failing, it can be doubly difficult. But even so, as the mentor, it's really important to try and recognise that there's something wrong and engage in a conversation as soon as you can. And we'll talk about this in the next slide in a little bit more detail. It's also important to state that the student must be afforded the opportunity to succeed by being provided with additional support. And there are support mechanisms available through QMU, be the extenuating circumstances process, the deferral process. We can offer students' individual learning plans and individual learning support. We also have the personal academic tutor element that we can offer support through. So it's important that students are offered as much support as possible to get them through this process. Now, there are a number of processes and interventions we can follow in order to support the failing student, but the first thing to say is that early intervention is absolute key. Don't give benefit of the doubt to the student, and I don't mean that in a nasty way. What I'm saying is that if you see somebody struggling, don't think, oh, they're just having a bad day. It's really important to listen to those alarm bells and talk to them as soon as possible so that things aren't blown out of all proportion in order that they become unmanageable. If you then have a genuine concern, please contact SMEC or QMU to raise your cause for concern, because you are really the first line with respect to the student's progress. So unless you tell us about issues, we don't know about them. So please let us know about the cause for concern. From that point, we can then arrange a formal meeting with the student, and this can be with or without the programme team member, to discuss the issues. And this is really the first formal element of the process. The first thing to say is really always be prepared for an emotional response. It may not happen, but very often if you've got a struggling student, there's always some underlying emotional issue, and you do get tears and an emotional response. Ask the student how they think they're getting on in a particular area. Don't tell them what you think, but ask them what they think, and be clear to the student then exactly what the problem is and give examples. So again, we're talking about feed forward in a way. We're talking about a dialogue generating in this process. And then you need to discuss and be very, very clear about the expectations, the objectives and the responsibilities of the student in order that they can successfully progress and succeed the competencies. That's really important. At that point, you will then agree and formalise an action plan, and this is done with SMEC, QMU and any of the support services necessary within the student services element at QMU University. And it's really, really important that you document your discussion and that you get the student to see and to agree that the documentation is correct, because then you will have evidence that you have discussed and that you've tried to support the student. And this is really key to any of these elements in case it doesn't progress in the way that you want it to. If you have any questions about any of these processes, please contact either an individual at QMU or at SMEC, and we can talk you through these processes. So hopefully that's useful. As always, if you've got any questions, please contact me at QMU University. My email address is sholmes@qmu.ac.uk.